Imagine that the sun is already beginning to disappear behind a line of distant hills. The road beneath your feet is uneven, marked by wagon wheels, horses, and countless travelers who have passed this way before you. The air is becoming cooler. Somewhere across the fields, a farmer is guiding his animals home. Birds are settling along rooftops and branches. Smoke rises in narrow columns from buildings scattered across the countryside. Ahead stands a castle. From a distance, it appears almost motionless. Its walls rise above the surrounding landscape, catching the last orange light of evening. Towers mark the corners. Small openings break the heavy stone. Above the gatehouse, a guard looks down toward the road. There is nothing unusual about this evening. No army waits beyond the horizon. No siege engines approach. No king is arriving with a great procession. For most of the people inside the walls, tonight will be just another night. And that is precisely what makes it interesting. History often remembers castles as places of battles, royal ceremonies, imprisonment, intrigue, and political power. Paintings and films fill their halls with knights and banners. Tourism has transformed ruined fortresses into romantic reminders of another age. But castles were also homes. They were places where people became tired, places where meals were cooked, where children slept, where servants carried water through dark corridors, where guards stood through cold nights waiting for something that usually never happened, where fires slowly burned down, and where, eventually, nearly everyone closed their eyes. Tonight, rather than watching a battle from the castle walls, the story will follow the much quieter experience of spending an ordinary medieval night behind them. We will enter before the gates close. We will walk through kitchens glowing with fire. We will sit in the great hall while supper is served. We will discover where nobles, servants, soldiers, and travelers actually slept. We will see how people attempted to stay warm inside buildings made from enormous quantities of stone. We will follow guards during the midnight watch, and when the final candles disappear, we will remain inside the castle until the first light of morning appears beyond the walls. The medieval world was not one single place or moment. Castles changed dramatically across centuries and regions. A fortress in 12th century England could differ greatly from a residence in 15th century France, the German lands, Iberia, Italy, or elsewhere in Europe. So the night we are about to imagine is not meant to represent every castle that ever existed. Instead, it brings together common features of castle life across the medieval centuries to answer one simple question: what might it really have felt like to spend the night inside one? And our story begins just before sunset. The castle looks larger with every step. From far away, its walls appeared almost smooth. Now, individual stones can be seen. Some are darkened by years of rain. Others catch the final sunlight. Plants grow in small cracks where soil has accumulated. Birds circle above the towers before disappearing toward their evening roosts. The road narrows as it approaches the entrance. A cart is ahead of you. Its wheels move slowly over the ground, producing a repetitive wooden creak. Two men walk beside it. Behind them comes a small group of animals being driven toward shelter. Everyone seems aware that daylight is disappearing. In the modern world, sunset rarely creates an immediate sense of urgency. Streetlights appear automatically. Shops continue operating. Vehicles move through illuminated roads. A journey can continue long after the sky becomes dark. The medieval night was different. Artificial light existed, of course, but it was limited, expensive, smoky, inconvenient, and weak compared with modern illumination. Outside towns, villages, monasteries, and castles, darkness could become very deep. Traveling after sunset was therefore often slower and more difficult. Roads became harder to follow. Bridges, holes, stones, and muddy ground could be dangerous. In unfamiliar territory, the traveler also had to consider robbery, animals, and the simple possibility of becoming lost. The castle gate therefore represented more than an entrance. Before night, it represented shelter. Many castles had been placed carefully within the landscape. Some stood on hills where approaching travelers could be seen from far away. Others controlled river crossings, mountain routes, ports, roads, or valuable agricultural territory. The walls themselves demonstrated authority. Whoever controlled the castle often controlled the land around it. As you approach, several defensive structures become easier to understand. The entrance is not simply a hole through the wall. The gatehouse may be one of the most heavily protected parts of the complex. Heavy wooden doors can be closed. A portcullis, an iron or timber grating, might descend. Defenders could observe anyone approaching. In some castles, visitors crossed a bridge over a ditch or moat before reaching the gate. But tonight, there is no attack. The equipment of war is part of the background. The immediate concern is routine. Animals must be brought inside or secured elsewhere. Workers return. Deliveries are completed. Travelers who have legitimate business try to arrive before access becomes more restricted. A guard near the entrance watches the final movement. He has probably watched similar evenings hundreds of times. The cart in front of you passes through. The sound changes immediately beneath the gatehouse. Open-air noises become enclosed and louder for a few moments. Hooves strike harder surfaces. Voices seem closer. Then the cart moves into the courtyard beyond. You follow. For a moment, you turn. Through the entrance, the countryside remains visible. The road stretches away into the growing darkness. The sky still holds some pale orange near the horizon. Then the guards begin their familiar work. Wood shifts. Metal moves. The heavy gate closes. A final gap of evening light disappears. The sound of the doors meeting one another seems surprisingly final. For the people inside, the night has begun. Yet the castle is far from asleep. In fact, many parts of it are still extremely busy. The first thing a modern visitor might notice is that a working medieval castle does not feel like an empty ruin. It is full of movement. The courtyard is crowded with activities that have little to do with tournaments, battles, or royal ceremonies. A stable worker leads a horse away. Someone carries firewood. A servant crosses toward the kitchen with a container. Near another building, a craftsman is putting away tools. A dog moves between people, apparently convinced that whatever is happening must involve him. The castle is not merely a fortress, it is also a household. In larger castles, it may function almost like a small community. The exact population changes depending on the period, size of the castle, status of its owner, and circumstances. A modest castle might support a relatively small household. A major royal or noble residence could temporarily contain far more people, especially when the lord, court, visitors, officials, soldiers, and servants were present at the same time. The lord and his family occupy only a small part of this world. Behind them stands an entire system of labor. There are cooks, bakers, stable workers, porters, household officers, servants responsible for chambers, guards, clerks, priests or chaplains, craftsmen, messengers, and perhaps many others, depending on the castle. Some are permanent residents. Some stay only temporarily. Their sleeping arrangements will differ greatly. But before anyone can think seriously about bed, evening work has to be completed. Looking across the castle, you may see several important buildings or spaces. There is the Great Hall, the social center of many medieval households. There are kitchens where the evening meal is being prepared. There may be a chapel. Storerooms protect supplies. Stables house horses. Towers contain guardrooms or chambers. Private apartments offer some degree of separation for the most important residents. Different castles arrange these spaces differently, and buildings are altered repeatedly across generations. A castle is rarely frozen in one architectural moment. Walls are repaired, rooms are added, windows change. Old defensive spaces become more comfortable residences. Fireplaces are installed. Buildings disappear and new ones replace them. The castle that appears permanent is actually always changing. Tonight, however, none of that matters to the people crossing the courtyard. They are thinking about immediate tasks. The temperature is falling. The kitchen needs fuel. Horses need care. Water needs to be carried. The household expects supper. Inside the great hall, servants prepare tables. The hall is one of the most impressive rooms in the castle, but it is also practical. It can serve many purposes. Meals are eaten here. Guests are received. Business is conducted. Announcements may be made. Members of the household gather. In some periods and places, people might even sleep within or near such communal spaces. During the day, daylight enters through windows. Now the room begins to depend increasingly on flame. Candles are placed where needed. lamps may be used. The fireplace or hearth gives both light and warmth. The brightest area is never as evenly illuminated as a modern room. Instead, light exists in small islands. Faces near flames are visible. Corners disappear. Above, the roof structure fades into darkness. Outside, the courtyard is also changing. The number of people moving through it slowly decreases. Tools vanish into storage. Animals settle. Doors close. The sounds of work become fewer. But from the kitchen, activity continues. If one room remains energetic at this hour, it is likely to be there. Heat escapes whenever the door opens. The smell of cooking drifts into nearby passages. And while noble residents may be preparing to enjoy the evening, the cooks have reached one of the busiest moments of their day. So we follow the warmth. We leave the cooling courtyard. We pass through a doorway, and we enter the medieval kitchen. The kitchen is immediately warmer. After the evening air, the difference is almost uncomfortable. Open fires burn. Pots hang or stand near heat. Wood cracks. Steam rises. Several people work at once. One person tends the fire. Another carries ingredients. Someone cuts food at a table. Another checks bread. Instructions pass between them. The scene is organized chaos, but those working here understand its rhythm. In a wealthy medieval household, feeding everyone could be an enormous logistical operation. The popular image of medieval castle dining is dominated by extravagant feasts. Long tables overflow with meat. Musicians perform. Wine flows continuously. Servants carry endless platters. Such feasts certainly existed, especially during celebrations, visits, religious festivals, weddings, political events, or displays of status. But not every supper was a banquet. Most evenings were more ordinary. The household still needed food, and the size and quality of meals reflected wealth, rank, season, availability, religious rules, and local customs. Bread was fundamental. So were grains more generally. Ale or beer was common in many regions, while wine was more important in others. Vegetables might include onions, cabbages, peas, beans, leeks, or other locally available foods. Fish could be extremely important, especially on days when religious practice restricted the consumption of meat. Wealthier households had greater access to meat, spices, sugar, imported goods, and elaborate dishes. Yet even the wealthy lived in a world where food preservation required planning. There is no refrigerator in the corner, no freezer, no delivery truck arriving tomorrow morning. Food survives because people know how to dry it, smoke it, salt it, pickle it, ferment it, store it, or simply consume it before it spoils. Grain must be protected from moisture and pests. Meat may be salted, fish can be dried, herbs hang nearby. Cheese offers another method of preserving milk. Fruit can be dried. The annual cycle matters. A castle household does not eat exactly the same foods in every season. Winter changes everything. Spring brings different supplies. Harvest determines the security of the months ahead. Tonight's kitchen therefore contains the accumulated knowledge of generations. Nobody working here thinks of preservation as historical technology. It is simply how food works. Near the fire, a large pot is being watched carefully. Another fire supports roasting. Medieval cooking could involve specialized equipment: spits, cauldrons, pans, knives, mortars, storage vessels, and countless wooden implements. Large kitchens in wealthy residences sometimes became sophisticated working environments with several separate areas. But they were also hot, smoky, physically demanding, dangerous. A cook spends hours close to fire. Servants carry heavy containers. Floor surfaces may become slippery. Knives are constantly used. Water has to be moved manually. Firewood has to be carried repeatedly. The meal enjoyed in the Great Hall is made possible by a large amount of labor that diners may hardly notice. This evening, the workers are preparing several dishes. We do not need to imagine an extravagant royal feast. A more ordinary noble household meal will do. Bread, perhaps a stew or pottage. Meat or fish depending on circumstances. Vegetables, cheese, ale or wine. Maybe a more refined dish intended for the high table. The details differ across Europe and across centuries, but the basic experience is recognizable. People are hungry. Food is being prepared. The day is ending. One servant carries a tray from the kitchen. Then another. The route to the hall becomes busy. Platters leave the heat and pass through cooler corridors. By the time the final dishes are ready, many kitchen workers have already spent most of the day on their feet. Yet their work will not finish when the household finishes eating. Everything will eventually return. Pots, knives, serving vessels, scraps, grease, ash, food that must be stored. And tomorrow the process begins again. For now, however, the main attention of the castle shifts toward the great hall. The hall looks warmer than it did earlier. Firelight moves across the walls. Textiles help soften the stone surfaces. Tables have been arranged. People begin taking their places. The arrangement is not random. Medieval society is intensely conscious of status. Who sits where may communicate rank. In a major household, the most important residents and guests can occupy the high table, often positioned prominently within the room. Others sit according to their position in the household. The evening meal is therefore not only about hunger, it also quietly expresses the social order. The lord of the castle is not simply another person eating supper. His location, food, clothing, servants, and companions may all demonstrate authority. Yet, if we ignore rank for a moment and listen to the room, the experience becomes more familiar. People talk, someone laughs, a servant passes between tables, a dog hopes that food will fall, a child is becoming tired, someone complains quietly about tomorrow's work, another person repeats a piece of news. Rain may be expected, a messenger arrived earlier, a horse needs attention, the harvest is discussed, a local dispute may be mentioned. The great events of medieval history are happening somewhere beyond these walls, but ordinary conversation occupies most of the evening. The utensils would look unfamiliar in some ways. Knives are common, spoons are used. Forks, depending on time and region, may not yet be normal table equipment. People can eat with fingers when appropriate. Bread itself might serve practical purposes at the table. Drinking vessels pass between hands. Table manners exist, though they do not always match modern customs. Medieval people are not unaware of etiquette. Texts from the period sometimes instruct diners on proper behavior. Do not reach rudely. Do not behave greedily. Do not create unnecessary mess. Do not offend the people beside you. Every age has its own version of acceptable dinner behavior. The meal continues. There may be entertainment in some households, music, a storyteller, a visiting performer, but this is not required every evening. Many nights are probably much quieter. The fire is more interesting than any formal entertainment. Its light moves across faces. Outside, complete darkness has arrived. Anyone looking through a small window sees little more than blackness. Beyond the walls, the countryside is now hidden. Inside, the castle has become an island of firelight. Gradually, the meal ends. Servants begin collecting vessels. Platters return toward the kitchen. People stand. Some continue conversations. Others leave immediately. The great hall is slowly transformed. The warmth remains. The smell of food remains. But the center of the evening is over. For the wealthy residents, attention turns toward private chambers. For servants, work continues. For guards, the longest part of their shift may still be ahead. And for those with simpler places in the household, there is another question. Where will they sleep? We leave the great hall and move deeper into the residential part of the castle. The air becomes cooler away from the fire. A servant carries a candle ahead. Its light touches the nearest section of wall but does not travel far. At the top of a staircase lies a chamber used by a noble resident. To modern eyes, it may not appear as enormous as expected. Films often imagine royal bedrooms as vast spaces of perfect privacy. Medieval privacy worked differently. A noble person might possess chambers inaccessible to most ordinary residents, certainly, but servants could remain close. Attendants entered to perform duties. Family members might occupy connected rooms. Important guests might have their own temporary arrangements. The idea of one individual spending an entire evening alone behind a locked door was not necessarily the ideal in every medieval household. The bed itself, however, could be extraordinary. Among wealthy people, beds were valuable possessions. A good bed involved much more than a wooden frame. There were mattresses, sheets, blankets, coverlets, pillows, curtains. Textiles could be extremely expensive. Inventories of wealthy households sometimes show just how valuable elaborate bedding could become. The bed therefore communicated status. A magnificent set of bed hangings was not merely decoration. It was wealth made visible. Yet those curtains also performed a practical task. They helped trap warmth. In a cold chamber, drawing curtains around the bed created a smaller enclosed space. Body heat remained inside more effectively. Drafts were reduced. The person sleeping within had a kind of room inside a room. Elsewhere in the chamber are chests. Clothing may be stored inside. There might be stools or benches, a wash basin, religious images, a candle stand, perhaps a table. Depending on the wealth and date, the room might have painted decoration, tapestries, wall hangings, or carved furniture. It may look impressive, but it can still be cold. Stone stores cold extremely well. A fire warms the area near it, but heat distribution is limited. Stand close to the hearth, and the chamber feels comfortable. Move farther away, and the difference becomes obvious. The occupant prepares for bed. A servant may help remove clothing or arrange garments for the morning. People did not all sleep completely unclothed, and habits varied widely. Nightwear and undergarments depended on period, region, wealth, and individual practice. What matters most tonight is warmth. Heavy textiles are valuable. The bed is prepared, the curtains are checked, a candle remains lit nearby. Before sleeping, the occupant may pray. Religion is not a separate part of medieval life reserved for certain occasions. For many people, it shapes the structure of the day. Prayers at bedtime are therefore ordinary. The room becomes quieter. The servant withdraws or takes a nearby place, depending on household arrangements. The fire continues. For the noble occupant, the day is almost over. Yet even a wealthy person cannot fully control the medieval night. Wind still reaches the castle. Winter still enters through stone. Smoke sometimes behaves badly. The mattress is not modern. There is no electric light beside the bed, no central heating, no glass window of the kind expected in a modern home, at least not everywhere, and not in every period. Luxury is real, so is discomfort. But compared with the sleeping arrangements of many other residents, this chamber offers remarkable comfort. To understand the contrast, we leave the noble bed behind. We descend again, and we look for everyone else. The castle contains many beds, but it contains even more people. Not everyone has a private chamber. Some servants sleep close to the people they serve, others sleep in communal rooms. Some may use halls, lofts, kitchens, service rooms, or temporary spaces, depending on the design of the castle and their status. Soldiers and guards might share guard rooms or chambers near defensive positions. Stable workers may remain close to the animals. Travelers and guests receive sleeping arrangements according to rank. A high-status guest could be offered considerable comfort. A low-status traveler might be grateful simply to sleep somewhere dry and protected. Sharing sleeping spaces is common. The modern expectation that every adult should possess a private bedroom belongs to a world with very different standards of housing and space. For much of history, privacy is expensive. People grow up accustomed to sleeping near relatives, servants, colleagues, or strangers. At an inn, travelers might even share beds. Inside the castle, the quality of bedding can vary dramatically. Some people sleep on wooden bedsteads, others use pallets. Mattresses may be filled with straw, wool, feathers, or other materials depending on wealth. A simple sack filled with straw can provide insulation from a hard surface. It is far from luxurious, but it is better than bare stone. Blankets matter enormously. Wool becomes one of the most important materials in the sleeping world. A thick wool covering can turn an uncomfortable room into a survivable one. People arrange themselves according to available warmth. Spaces near fireplaces are desirable. Rooms above kitchens may benefit from heat rising through the structure. Interior chambers can be warmer than exposed external rooms. Yet many workers simply sleep wherever their household role places them. Imagine one servant settling onto a pallet after carrying dishes for most of the evening. He does not require a bedtime ritual. He is exhausted. Another worker has not finished yet. She is still inside the kitchen helping clean and organize. A young servant nearby folds clothing or prepares items needed in the morning. Two men who serve in the guard force are discussing their shifts. One will sleep now, The other will remain awake. Their arrangement demonstrates something important. A castle never entirely sleeps. Even during the quietest hour, someone is responsible for the gate. Someone watches the walls. Someone may tend a fire. Someone responds if an animal becomes restless. Someone wakes if an important resident calls. The great household resembles a living machine. Most of its parts stop at night. A few keep moving. The people settling onto simple beds hear the final sounds of evening activity. Footsteps, a door, voices from another room, a container being placed on a table. Firewood shifting, then fewer sounds. Someone pulls a blanket higher. Another person turns toward the wall. The light disappears. Within minutes, exhaustion does what comfort cannot. People sleep. And as the castle becomes quieter, one thing becomes increasingly noticeable: the cold. Castles look strong because stone looks permanent. Thick walls create an impression of protection. Against arrows, fire, attack, and weather, stone offers enormous advantages. Against cold, the situation is more complicated. Stone walls can become extremely cold during winter. They absorb the temperature around them. A chamber may remain uncomfortable even with a fire burning. Modern visitors sometimes assume that a large fireplace would make the entire room warm. Anyone who has stood in a historic stone building during winter knows otherwise. The area immediately around the fire can be pleasant. Several steps away, the air changes. Early medieval halls might use open hearths, with smoke escaping through openings above. Over time, fireplaces and chimneys became increasingly sophisticated and widespread in elite buildings. They allowed heat to be directed into particular rooms. But heating an entire castle remained difficult. Fuel therefore became essential. Every flame represents labor. Trees must be cut. Wood must be transported, stored, dried, carried inside, placed beside hearths, added throughout the day. Someone must remove ash. Someone must ensure sparks do not create a disaster. A large household consumes significant quantities of fuel. This is one of the hidden systems that makes comfortable castle life possible. The Lord does not simply decide to have a warm chamber. A chain of workers makes that warmth exist. Tonight, in the noble chamber, the fire has been prepared. In the great hall, embers remain. In the kitchen, fires used for cooking are being reduced or managed for the night. Some fires may be banked carefully so that usable embers remain by morning. Fire is comforting. It is also dangerous. A castle contains wood everywhere despite its stone walls. Floors, roofs, furniture, doors, textiles, stored fuel. A spark in the wrong place can become catastrophic. Nighttime fire therefore requires caution. Braziers or portable heating devices may be used in certain contexts, though they also create hazards from smoke and fumes. The easiest way to stay warm is often not to heat the entire room. It is to heat the person. This is where medieval textiles become so important. Before we examine them, walk once through the castle with the firelight behind us. Leave the warm kitchen. The first corridor is cooler. Turn toward a staircase. The stone beneath the hand feels cold. At the next level, a small window opening allows a slight movement of air. A shutter has been closed, but the seal is imperfect. Continue toward an exterior tower. The temperature drops again. A guard near the opening pulls his cloak closer around his shoulders. He knows the cold better than anyone sleeping below. Return toward the residential chambers. Here, wall hangings reduce drafts. Doors limit airflow. Curtains help. The difference may only be a few degrees, but a few degrees matter. The medieval strategy against cold is therefore layered. Fire, architecture, textiles, clothing, shared body heat, habit, and patience. Winter cannot be defeated. It can only be endured. Return to the bedroom. The fire has become smaller. The bed curtains are closed. Inside them, the air is slightly warmer. This simple arrangement is more effective than it first appears. Instead of trying to heat an entire stone chamber, the sleeper creates a smaller enclosed environment. The human body becomes part of the heating system. Heavy blankets trap warmth. A second person sharing the bed provides more. For modern listeners accustomed to individual beds and private rooms, historical bed sharing can seem unusual. For earlier societies, it could be entirely practical. Married couples obviously shared beds. Children might sleep with relatives. Servants could share. Travelers at inns sometimes shared beds with people they barely knew. a guest might share according to circumstances. Sleeping alone was not always the default. Nor was it always desirable in winter. Textiles were the real technology of nighttime comfort. Wool was especially useful because it retained warmth and was widely available across much of medieval Europe. Linen served other purposes. Feathers might fill luxury bedding. Straw provided a cheaper mattress filling. A wealthy bed could contain multiple layers. A poor sleeper might have far fewer. But everyone understood the difference a good blanket made. Imagine the castle one room at a time. In a noble chamber, thick bed hangings surround a feather mattress. In another room, 2 servants lie beneath coarse wool blankets. In a guardroom, a man still wearing part of his clothing has fallen asleep immediately after his shift. Near the kitchen, someone rests on a simple pallet, where residual heat makes the space preferable to a colder chamber. In another corner of the castle, a child sleeps beside a sibling. Nothing dramatic happens. That is the point. The most common experience of castle life was ordinary. The body grows tired, the temperature falls. People arrange blankets, then sleep arrives. Over the next hour, fires become smaller, a flame bends, recovers, and disappears. Logs collapse into glowing embers. The castle loses light. A servant crosses one final corridor carrying a candle. She closes a door, checks another, then turns toward her sleeping place. After she leaves, only darkness remains. Not the soft darkness of a modern bedroom, where light from a street lamp often enters through curtains. This is a deeper darkness. The kind in which a person may not see a hand held several feet away. The kind medieval people knew very well. And with so little to see, the ears become more important. Because a castle at night is never completely silent. Modern humans live surrounded by inexpensive light. A switch can illuminate an entire room. A phone creates more light than many historical households could produce easily. The medieval relationship with darkness was therefore fundamentally different. People expected night to be dark. Light had a cost. Beeswax candles could burn relatively cleanly and pleasantly, but beeswax was valuable. Churches and wealthy households used them extensively, yet ordinary people often relied on cheaper alternatives. Tallow candles, made using animal fat, were more accessible but could produce unpleasant smells and smoke. Rushlights offered an even simpler form of illumination. A rush could be prepared and coated in fat, creating a small temporary light. Oil lamps existed in various forms. Fireplaces and hearths provided light as well as heat. Torches could illuminate larger spaces or exterior areas, though they were not delicate household lamps. None of these creates the uniform brightness of electricity. Imagine holding one candle. The nearest objects are clear. Your hand, the wall, the edge of a doorway. Several steps farther away, details disappear. At the end of a corridor, there is only darkness. This changes how a building is experienced. A staircase that is easy during daylight becomes uncertain. Steps are uneven. The flame moves whenever air passes. Corners hide furniture. People who know the castle well navigate from memory. They count steps unconsciously. They remember where floors change level. They know which doorway comes next. A visitor might require guidance. Important residents may have servants carrying lights. The need for illumination shapes the day's schedule. Tasks requiring close visual attention are easier before sunset. Reading manuscripts at night is possible, but light must be positioned carefully. Sewing requires similar concentration. Some work continues after dark, but daylight is valuable. The night therefore encourages a natural slowing of activity. One by one, tasks end. One by one, lights disappear. The castle becomes a collection of small glowing points separated by darkness. A fire in the great hall, a candle in a chamber, a lamp near the gate, a torch outside, then fewer. A noble closes the curtains around a bed. A servant pinches out a candle. Darkness returns immediately. To the modern imagination, this can seem eerie. To the medieval resident, it is simply normal. Darkness is not an event, it is half of every day. People do not need to see everything around them at all times. They learn to live with the unknown space beyond the flame. And when sight becomes less useful, another sense quietly takes over. Sound. Listen. At first there seems to be nothing. Then the castle begins to reveal itself. Wind moves around the walls. A shutter taps softly somewhere above. A horse shifts in the stable. From the kitchen, a piece of wood collapses into embers. A guard walks across the courtyard. His footsteps sound louder than they did during the day. Without conversation and work surrounding them, individual noises travel farther. Old buildings create their own sounds. Wood contracts as temperatures change. Doors move slightly. Roof timbers respond to wind. Rain, when it arrives, can dominate everything. It strikes tiles, wood, earth, and stone. Water moves through drains and gutters. Anyone sleeping beneath a roof may hear it for hours. Animals add their own nighttime layer. Horses stamp. Dogs wake briefly and settle again. Rodents move where food is stored. Birds sometimes call unexpectedly. Beyond the walls, owls and other nocturnal creatures occupy a landscape invisible to human eyes. There are human sounds too. Someone coughs. A child wakes. A servant turns on a mattress. A guard speaks quietly to another. A person opens a door to visit a garderobe or chamber pot. Then quiet returns. Medieval sleeping spaces are rarely acoustically isolated. People hear one another. Floors creak. Walls do not necessarily block sound. Shared rooms obviously offer even less privacy. Snoring must have been as common then as now. So must restless sleepers. The castle night is therefore not silent. It is simply quieter, and as midnight approaches, the sounds become more repetitive. Footsteps, wind, embers, animals. Then footsteps again. If this were an ordinary night, nothing alarming interrupts the pattern. No horn sounds. No alarm is raised. No gate is attacked. No urgent messenger arrives. The guards would probably prefer boredom. Boredom means everyone inside remains safe. Eventually, even the occasional conversation among servants disappears. Nearly the whole castle is asleep. Only a small number of people remain awake. We follow one of them. His footsteps cross the courtyard. He reaches the stairs. He begins climbing toward the walls. The wind is stronger above. The guard pulls his cloak around him. Below lies the courtyard. Beyond the outer wall lies almost nothing visible at all. The countryside has disappeared. Perhaps a few distant lights remain where a village or farmhouse still has a fire burning. Otherwise, the world is black. The guard knows that the darkness can hide movement, but most nights it hides nothing more dangerous than trees, fields, animals, and roads. Medieval castles are military structures, but they are not under siege every night. For many residents, years may pass without serious attack. Security is nevertheless part of the household routine. Gates must be controlled, visitors identified, doors checked, walls watched. A suspicious fire or unusual movement deserves attention. The guard follows his route. His job is more repetitive than heroic. Walk, look, listen, wait. Move to the next position. Exchange a few words. Wait again. A modern person might imagine the medieval watchman staring constantly into the darkness for enemy soldiers. In reality, much of the work must have involved ordinary vigilance. Is the gate secure? Has anyone approached? Are the stables quiet? Is there any sign of fire? Has a door been left open? Do the other guards remain at their stations? Time passes slowly. Without a modern clock, the experience of an hour feels different. Some castles later contain mechanical clocks or have access to bells marking time. Earlier systems depend more on routines, celestial observation, religious hours, and practical judgment. The guard may know roughly how much of his shift remains. He does not need to know the exact minute. The sky tells part of the story. Stars move. The moon changes position. Cold deepens. Another man eventually arrives to relieve him. Their conversation is brief. Nothing happened. That is good. The first guard descends. His hands are cold. He is tired. He reaches the guardroom and finds a place prepared for sleeping. Within minutes, he may be unconscious. The replacement walks the same route. He sees almost exactly the same things. Stone, darkness, sky, a distant light. His entire shift may pass without event, and while he waits, quieter work continues below. The kitchen is nearly empty. The room that seemed chaotic only a few hours ago has changed completely. Work surfaces have been cleared. Food has been stored. Tools return to their places. Water containers sit ready. The great fires used during cooking are reduced. One worker remains. He checks the hearth. Perhaps he banks embers carefully so they can be revived more easily in the morning. Another servant finishes cleaning a final vessel. Neither person speaks much. There is nothing left to discuss. Their bodies are tired. Medieval household work begins early. For many servants, the day is long. The idea that everyone simply stops when the Lord goes to bed misunderstands the household. Someone has to prepare the bedroom before the Lord arrives. Someone clears after supper. Someone cares for animals. Someone ensures doors are secure. Someone carries waste away. Someone prepares for tomorrow. The elite household sleeps because other people have created the conditions for sleep. A servant crosses the great hall. The room is almost entirely dark. Tables remain, but the people are gone. Only a faint glow survives near the hearth. During the day, this hall represented rank and ceremony. At midnight, it is simply an empty room. The servant continues toward a staircase. In one hand is a small light. In the other, perhaps folded cloth or an empty container. At a chamber door, she pauses, listens. Nothing. She moves on. Elsewhere, a stable worker makes one final check. The horses are valuable. They represent transport, warfare, status, hunting, communication, and work. Their care cannot be postponed simply because humans are tired. The stable smells of hay, animals, leather, and earth. A horse turns its head. The worker touches its neck. Everything seems normal. He closes the door. Another task finished. Eventually, these final workers retreat to their beds. The castle becomes quieter again. By now, midnight has passed. The cold reaches its deepest stage. Even the walls seem asleep. There are no voices in the courtyard. No servants walking through corridors. No dishes. No carts. Nothing but the guard above and the occasional movement of an animal. The castle has entered the deepest hours of darkness, and for the next part of our journey, very little needs to happen at all. The courtyard is empty. If we could stand in its center without disturbing anyone, we would see almost nothing, perhaps a faint light from the guard room. Perhaps the remains of a fire behind a distant opening. Above, the sky is brighter than the earth. Stars hang over the towers. The stone beneath our feet is cold. This is the quietest hour. Inside the great hall, benches and tables wait for morning. In the kitchen, iron pots hang motionless. In private chambers, curtains remain closed. In servants' rooms, bodies lie close together beneath blankets. Across the castle, people occupy many different social ranks. During daylight, those differences define almost everything. Who gives orders? Who carries them out? Who eats first? Who sits at the high table? Who owns the land? Who sleeps in the finest chamber? But in the middle of the night, distinctions become less visible. A lord, sleeping beneath embroidered hangings, and a servant on a straw-filled mattress share the same basic vulnerability. Both are unconscious. Both depend on walls and guards. Both seek warmth. Both may wake if the wind is strong enough. Both will eventually need to rise again. Time passes. To medieval people, nighttime is not necessarily divided into hours, as precisely as modern people divide it. Today, a digital display tells us that it is 2:17 in the morning, then 2:18, then 2:19. The measurement continues whether we need it or not. For most medieval residents, such precision would have little practical value. Monasteries developed disciplined schedules organized around religious observance. Bells could divide the day and night. Later medieval towns increasingly used mechanical clocks. But ordinary people still experienced time through physical signs: light, darkness, meals, work, prayer, the position of the sun, the sound of bells, the behavior of animals. Night felt like a sequence rather than a digital measurement. Early evening, the deeper night, the time before dawn. The coming of morning. Right now, the castle is in that long central period when dawn still feels distant. Some sleepers may wake, perhaps only for a few moments. A person turns. Another adjusts a blanket. Someone opens his eyes and listens. Wind. Nothing else. He closes them again. This leads to one of the more interesting questions historians have asked about pre-industrial sleep. Did people sleep differently from us? There are historical references, especially from later medieval and early modern Europe, to a pattern sometimes described as a first sleep and a second sleep. According to this interpretation, some people went to bed not long after darkness, slept for several hours, woke for a period during the night, and then returned to sleep until morning. The idea has become popular because it seems so different from the modern expectation of one uninterrupted block of roughly 8 hours. But we should be cautious. Not every medieval person followed one universal sleeping schedule. There was no single medieval bedtime. Season mattered, occupation mattered, age mattered, health mattered, household responsibilities mattered. A guard on night watch clearly slept differently from a farmer. A monk waking for nighttime prayer followed another schedule. A mother caring for a baby followed another. Servants responsible for chambers might be interrupted by their employers. Winter nights were longer than summer nights. People adapted. Still, the idea of waking during the night was not necessarily viewed as unusual. If someone wakes inside our imaginary castle, what might they do? Perhaps nothing. They may simply lie beneath the blankets. A married couple might speak quietly. Someone could say a prayer. A servant might check a fire. A parent could tend to a child. A person might use a chamber pot. Another might think about tomorrow. Then sleep returns. There is something reassuringly ordinary about this. The medieval sleeper is not fundamentally different from the modern person awake at 3 in the morning. Thoughts arrive. The room feels strange. The rest of the world seems very far away. Then tiredness slowly returns. Imagine one resident opening his eyes. He cannot see much. The curtains around the bed block whatever tiny amount of light enters the chamber. He hears the wind. For a moment he thinks about rising. The stone floor will be cold. He decides not to. He pulls the blanket closer. Soon his breathing becomes regular again. Across the castle, similar tiny moments happen without anyone recording them. No chronicle mentions them. No official document preserves them. History almost never records a person adjusting a blanket at midnight. Yet millions of such moments made up medieval life. And now, after this brief waking period, the castle becomes quiet again. There remains only one practical problem. Sooner or later, someone will need to leave the warmth of the bed. Medieval castles are often admired for towers, walls, gatehouses, great halls. Few visitors arrive excited to study the toilets. Yet sanitation tells us far more about daily life than many dramatic architectural features. A castle resident eventually faces the same biological needs as anyone else. In many castles, toilets known today as garderobes were built into the structure. Designs varied. Some projected from walls, allowing waste to fall outside. Others emptied into shafts, pits, or other collection areas. In certain locations, water systems could assist removal. The exact arrangement depended on architecture, date, wealth, and local conditions. A garderobe might be a small stone chamber with a simple seat positioned above an opening. It offered some privacy. It did not offer warmth. Imagine leaving a bed during a winter night and walking toward one. The journey alone is enough to encourage the use of another important object, the chamber pot. It is simple, portable, practical, and widely useful. A noble resident does not need to cross the castle in darkness. Neither does a child. Neither does someone in poor health. The pot can be used and dealt with later, often by servants. This is not glamorous, but it is exactly the kind of ordinary technology that makes historical life possible. Water presents another challenge. Modern households assume that clean water appears instantly from a tap. In a castle, every container of water must come from somewhere: a well, a cistern, a spring, a pipe system in more sophisticated contexts, a river, or other source. Then someone has to move it. Water is heavy. Carrying it upstairs requires effort. This limits how casually people can use it. Yet the old stereotype that medieval people never washed is too simple. People washed hands and faces. Bathing practices varied widely, according to period, place, wealth, medical beliefs, access to facilities, and local culture. Public bathhouses existed in many medieval towns. Wealthy people could arrange private bathing. Basic washing was common. What they lacked was the unlimited running water of a modern bathroom. Inside the bedchamber, a basin may be used in the morning. Cloths assist washing. Hands may be cleaned before meals. Clothing and linen require their own systems of washing. Again, servants provide much of the labor behind elite cleanliness. The nighttime castle therefore contains an entire invisible sanitation network. Pots, pits, drains, water containers, waste removal, cleaning. all of it performed manually. A person wakes, uses the chamber pot, returns to bed. The event lasts only a few minutes. By morning, a servant may remove the evidence. Another tiny piece of history disappears. No matter how beautiful the bed, medieval sleep includes inconveniences. Consider the mattress. If it contains straw, that straw has to be maintained. It can become compressed, dirty, uncomfortable. Bedding made from natural materials can attract insects. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, and other pests were familiar problems in many pre-modern environments. Wealth does not automatically eliminate them. A fine bed can still host unwanted guests. Cleaning therefore matters. Bedding can be aired, linens changed, rooms swept, straw replaced. Household manuals and records from later periods reveal continual efforts to maintain domestic spaces. The medieval household is not simply indifferent to dirt, it works constantly against it. Smoke creates another problem. Fire provides essential warmth, but combustion produces smoke. Chimneys improve conditions, yet drafts can send smoke unpredictably. An imperfectly drawing fireplace can fill part of a room with an unpleasant haze. Eyes water. Clothing absorbs the smell. People adapt. Then there are drafts. A shutter may not fit perfectly. A doorway allows cold air through. Wind finds cracks. Textiles help. Wall hangings offer insulation. Curtains around beds reduce airflow. But nothing creates the sealed environment of modern construction. The temperature of the castle remains connected to the weather outside. Rain makes it damp. Winter makes it cold. Summer can make certain rooms surprisingly warm. Storms create noise. Every resident understands these conditions as normal. This is important. Modern people often imagine historical discomfort by comparing every detail with modern comfort. The medieval person does not make that comparison. He does not lie on a straw mattress wishing for memory foam. He has never seen memory foam. She does not complain that the room lacks central heating. The concept does not exist. People compare their conditions with the lives of others around them. A servant knows that the noble bed is better. A noble knows that another noble's residence may be more luxurious. A poor traveler is grateful to sleep beneath a roof. Standards are relative. Over time, even recurring discomforts become familiar. The noise, the cold, the insects, the smoke, the crowded room, the heavy smell of wool, people, animals, fire, food and stone. This is simply what a castle smells like, what winter feels like, what nighttime sounds like. People adapt because adaptation is one of humanity's greatest skills. And after a while, the body stops noticing many things. A blanket is adjusted. A shutter knocks once in the wind. A sleeper shifts position. Then everything settles. The eastern sky remains dark, but not for much longer. The first person to wake may not be the Lord. It may be a kitchen worker, or a stable hand, or a guard reaching the end of his watch. Morning in a large household begins before most residents are ready to leave their beds. The kitchen needs time. Fires do not instantly appear. Someone must uncover or revive embers. Fresh wood is added. Air is encouraged through the coals. A faint glow becomes a flame. The flame becomes heat. Water is placed nearby. Food preparation begins. Bread may already be partway through a longer process. Servants move carefully through dim rooms. This hour is still mostly night. Outside, the horizon has only just begun to change. There is no sunrise yet, only a slight reduction in darkness. In the stable, animals notice first. Horses shift. One receives water, another is groomed. Tack is checked. A worker speaks quietly, perhaps more to the animal than to himself. His hands are cold. The stable is not comfortable, but the movement of work creates warmth. Above, a guard watches the eastern sky. Stars become less visible. The world beyond the walls slowly returns. First the nearest land, then trees, then buildings, then roads. The black countryside becomes grey. Birds begin calling. Inside the castle, another fire is lit, then another. The process reverses the evening. Last night, lights disappeared one at a time. Now they return. Last night, voices became fewer. Now footsteps multiply. A servant carries water upstairs. Another prepares clothing. Someone opens shutters. Cold morning air enters briefly. The person in the bed protests, or pulls the blanket higher. Getting out of bed is not a modern invention. Neither is the desire to remain there. Eventually necessity wins. Clothing is put on. Layers matter. The room is cold away from the bed. The noble household begins to wake. Religious observance may structure part of the morning. A chapel becomes active. A priest or chaplain prepares. Elsewhere, administrative work begins. Messages wait. Decisions must be made. The lord of a castle does not spend every day hunting and feasting. Managing land, finances, legal obligations, relationships, disputes, military responsibilities, and household affairs creates endless work. For servants, the work is more physical. The bed must be arranged. Waste removed, water replenished, food delivered, floors attended to. The castle requires maintenance every single day. A building this large does not take care of itself. The people who keep it functioning are already fully awake before many high-ranking residents have finished dressing. And outside the gate, the world is returning as well. Travelers approach. Workers wait. Farmers begin moving. The road that disappeared last night becomes visible again. Soon the gate will open. The sound of the gate opening is very different from the sound of it closing. Last night, the doors shut with finality. Now they open toward possibility. Fresh air enters. The road beyond is active again. People pass in both directions. A messenger arrives. A worker leaves. Supplies are carried inside. Perhaps animals are moved. The castle reconnects with the surrounding countryside. Sunlight reaches the upper walls first. Then towers. Then part of the courtyard. The stones that looked dark and mysterious during the night are ordinary again. The great hall begins receiving daylight. Servants prepare it for another day. The kitchen is fully awake. Breakfast, depending on period and household practice, may be simple. Not every medieval person ate a large morning meal in the way modern people expect. Eating schedules changed across time and social class. But food appears where needed. Ale may be consumed. Bread is available. Leftovers can be reused. The household moves into its daytime rhythm. The guard from the midnight watch is asleep. Another guard takes responsibility. The servant who crossed the dark hall carrying a candle several hours ago is now carrying something else through the same space. The noble who slept behind thick curtains is dressed. The child who woke briefly during the night is running somewhere he probably should not. The horses are ready. The fires burn again. If we were to remain for another 12 hours, the cycle would repeat. Work, meals, visitors, messages, animals, firewood, water, prayer, conversation, then sunset. What is striking is how little of this would ever appear in a chronicle. A medieval writer recording the history of a noble family would not mention that the lord slept badly because the room was cold. He would not record that a kitchen servant woke before dawn. He would not preserve the name of the person who replaced the straw in a mattress. He would not describe the guard who watched an empty road for 4 hours and saw nothing. Yet these moments occupied almost all of human existence. Great political events are rare. Ordinary mornings are constant. This is why imagining one night inside a castle can reveal more about medieval life than imagining another battle. The castle is not simply a monument. It is a home filled with routines. And as we reach the final chapter, we can finally compare the castle imagined today with the one its residents actually knew. Today, castles are romantic. Their ruins stand above rivers and valleys. Grass grows where roofs once existed. Visitors walk through empty chambers. Information signs describe kings, queens, sieges, and architecture. Without smoke, animals, servants, waste, bedding, stored food, firewood, and crowded rooms, the castle becomes almost too clean in the imagination. It becomes a stage. But to medieval residents, it was not a stage. It was a workplace, a defensive structure, a symbol of authority, a home, a storage center, a court, a stable, a kitchen, a church, a collection of bedrooms and improvised sleeping spaces, a place where dozens of practical problems had to be solved every day. How do we keep everyone fed? Where does the water come from? How much wood remains? Who watches the gate tonight? Which chamber will the guest use? Is there enough fodder for the horses? Who needs to travel tomorrow? Which roof needs repair? Where will the servants sleep? The romance disappears quickly when ordinary questions return. Yet reality does not make castles less interesting. It makes them more human. Consider the noble bedroom once more. From a distance, it represents wealth. Fine textiles, carved furniture, a large bed, servants, a fireplace. But the person inside still wakes because the room is cold. Luxury exists alongside discomfort. Consider the Great Hall. Today it seems ceremonial. At night it contains food smells, dogs, spilled drink, tired servants, smoke, noise, conversation, and people hoping to finish work. His real enemy is boredom and cold. Consider the kitchen. Modern visitors often admire the enormous fireplaces. For the people working there, those fireplaces mean heat, smoke, burns, heavy pots, and hours of labor. Every romantic feature has an ordinary side, and the opposite is also true. Every ordinary feature contains something remarkable. The fact that households maintain these buildings without electricity, plumbing, refrigeration, modern transport, or industrial heating required extraordinary organization. The castle survives as a symbol because it concentrated human effort. Hundreds or thousands of people over generations cut stone, moved timber, forged metal, carried water, prepared food, repaired walls, cared for animals, guarded gates, cleaned rooms, copied documents, raised children, and slept behind the same walls. The castle was never only the Lord's creation. It belonged to everyone whose labor allowed it to function. This may be the most important lesson from our ordinary night. History looks different when viewed from the bedroom rather than the battlefield. The people become recognizable. They are no longer medieval figures. They are tired people, hungry people, cold people, people annoyed by noise, people relieved to reach bed, people who wake too early, people who do not want to leave the blankets, and across 800 years, those feelings require very little translation. The sun is setting again. The road outside the castle becomes darker. A cart approaches the gate. Its wooden wheel creaks. A horse lowers its head. Birds settle on the roof. Smoke rises from the kitchen. The guards prepare the entrance. One final traveler passes through. The gate closes. Inside, the household continues moving. Firewood crosses the courtyard. Food leaves the kitchen. Candles appear. People gather in the hall. For a while, the castle is bright by medieval standards. There is conversation, the sound of bowls and serving vessels, the smell of bread. Warmth from the fire. Then the meal ends. The hall empties. Servants collect what remains. In a chamber above, curtains are drawn around a bed. Elsewhere, a worker shakes out a wool blanket. A guard climbs the stairs. A stable worker checks the horses. One by one, candles disappear. The castle becomes dark. Wind moves around the towers. A horse shifts. A dog wakes and settles again. Embers collapse in the kitchen hearth. Someone walks through a corridor carrying a final light. For a moment, the flame appears beneath a doorway. Then it is gone. Midnight passes. The guard continues walking. Stone beneath his boots. Cold air against his face. Nothing beyond the walls. Nothing unusual. Exactly as everyone hoped. Inside, people sleep. A noble beneath embroidered hangings. A servant beneath coarse wool. A child beside a sibling. A soldier after his shift. A cook whose hands still smell faintly of smoke. Different lives, different ranks. The same night. Hours pass. A sleeper wakes briefly. Listens. Wind. Nothing more. A blanket moves. Eyes close again. The castle settles. No historian records this night. No monk writes its details into a chronicle. No battle gives it a name. No royal death makes it important. It simply happens, and then it disappears, just as millions of ordinary nights disappear. Eventually, the eastern sky changes. Black becomes grey. Stars vanish. A bird calls. Someone in the kitchen wakes. Embers are uncovered. Wood is placed carefully above them. A tiny flame appears. The flame grows. Water is carried. A stable door opens. Footsteps return to the courtyard. Another fire begins. Then another. A servant climbs the stairs with a basin. A guard watches the horizon brighten. The road becomes visible. Trees return. Fields return. Roofs return. The world outside the walls exists again. A heavy door moves. The castle gate opens. Morning enters. For the people who lived there, the night is already becoming unimportant. There is work to do, meals to prepare, animals to care for, visitors to receive, messages to send, rooms to clean, fires to maintain. They cannot know that centuries later, strangers will walk through the remains of their home and wonder how they lived. They cannot know that their cooking pots will become museum objects, that historians will study their household records, that tourists will photograph their bedrooms, that archaeologists will examine the waste pits they would prefer everyone forgot. They simply live, and perhaps this is where history becomes most comforting. The distance between then and now seems enormous when measured in technology. No electricity, no running water, no cars, no central heating, no modern medicine, no phones, no electric lamps. But the distance becomes smaller when measured in ordinary human experience. They finished long days feeling tired. They looked forward to food. They complained about weather. They sought warmth. They worried about their families. They listened to storms. They disliked leaving bed on cold mornings. They told stories. They laughed. They worked. They rested. And eventually, they slept. Tonight, the walls of our imagined castle can become quiet once again. The kitchen has finished its work. The great hall is empty. The servants have found their beds. The horses are calm. The gate is secure. The fires have burned low. High on the walls, one guard continues his slow walk beneath the stars. He hears nothing unusual. He sees nothing approaching. He has no reason to wake anyone. So the castle sleeps. The wind moves across the stone. A final ember glows. Morning is still hours away. And for now, there is nowhere else anyone needs to be. The gates are closed. The work is finished. The blankets are warm enough. The castle is quiet. And the night continues.